I'm calling to order the Housing Authority of the City of Salem. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Commissioner Stapleton.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Phillips.
Here.
Commissioner Gwynn.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hoy.
Here.
Commissioner Nordyke.
Here.
Commissioner Varney.
Here.
Resident Commissioner Villegas.
Here.
And Chair Nishioka.
I'm here. Thank you. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Vice Chair Phillips, are there any additions or deletions tonight?
Not tonight.
Thank you.
No one signed up.
And there's no one signed up for public comment. Thank you. Vice Chair, do I hear a motion on the consent calendar?
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. I'd like to find out if anyone has any comments or further discussion on anything on the consent calendar.
And then if I could just summarize.
Oh, yes, you would do
No
that
worries.
first. Thank you.
So tonight's consent calendar consists of 3.1A, the August 12, 2024 draft Salem Housing Authority minutes. 3.3A, the memorandum of understanding to permit the Housing Authority to serve as the developer, owner, and manager of a new project, currently named Evergreen Apartments in partnership with Northwest Human Services. And 3.3B, revised Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you, Vice Chair Phillips. All right, I believe that we have Jessica Blakely that is going to give a bit of information.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Jessica Blakely, and I'm the Director of Development for the Salem Housing Authority. This MOU brought before you today is very exciting. As we spoke in the last time I saw you, we had one coming this month to talk about. This is a project that is currently owned by Northwest Human Services. It's 6 cottages and 1 house that are very old and basically obsolete, so it costs more to repair them than it would to just replace them. They have asked if we would take over that parcel of land and turn it into a multifamily affordable housing development. And so we've done some feasibility work on the lot itself. It seems to be a great option for us to build 26 to 28 units, which will serve families at an area median income of 60% or less. And we're hoping today that moving forward with this MOU will allow us to move from feasibility into pre-development and begin work on the construction project.
Wonderful. Thank you for that rundown. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Councilor Nordyke, or member. Commissioner.
No worries. Thank you so much. I too am excited to hear about this. I'm curious. Your report says that the units are currently occupied by Northwest Human Services clients. Is the intention to keep the clients there? Is the intention for it to continue to be Northwest Human Service clients, I assume?
Yes, thank you for that question. I did not clarify that before, but yes, there are current occupants of the building. Northwest Human Services would work with all of the families alongside Salem Housing Authority to relocate them while we're under construction. They would also have the first right of refusal to come back to the property, so they would be some of the first residents at the building. They would be chosen basically because they would benefit from the supportive services that Northwest Human Services intends to offer on site. So similar to a permanent supportive housing development, or as a permanent supportive housing development, they would be providing the supportive services on site, and we would be the owner, manager, developer. So very excited about that in partnership. They would also be providing referrals to the project itself from their programs that would benefit from those services on site. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Commissioner Gwynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoy,
Aye.
Commissioner Nordike,
Aye.
Commissioner Varney,
Aye.
Commissioner Stapleton,
Aye.
Vice Chair Phillips,
Aye.
Resident Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Chair Nishioka.
Aye. Thank you. We do not have any public hearings, and there is no special orders of business, so we're on to information reports. And I would like to see if anyone has any comments about the information report 6A.
Good evening. I'm Nicole Yates. I'm the Housing Administrator for Salem Housing Authority, and I just want to ensure that everybody has had an opportunity to see some of the great articles that are wrote by some of the staff of Salem Housing Authority out there doing the outreach and work on a day-to-day basis. We appreciate every single staff member at Salem Housing Authority and celebrated through the month of July with a SHA barbecue potluck. It was a great turnout. Staff had a wonderful time. We really are committed to the wellness and know that the job that they do out there every day is very difficult. I do also want to highlight our property management team. They have had a very long year, opening up 2 buildings in the same year, both Yaquina Hall and Sequoia Crossings. And we've been short-staffed a good portion of that year, and they have come around and done an amazing job. Both buildings are full, they're up and fully functioning as designed, as well as the whole team is really coming together and creating a team atmosphere with all the new employees. I wanted to highlight that out of the 700 units that we own and manage, our mechanic team has an average open work order day of 5.93 days. That's pretty amazing considering they have over 167 work orders in 1 month alone to close out. So just a tremendous effort, and sometimes they work out in the field and don't always get recognized, but wanted to say a big shout out to them and the team. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I simply, again, thank you for this wonderful report. I really enjoy reading these stories. It brings me a lot of warmth knowing how people are getting cared for. So thank you very much for providing us this information.
Thank you.
That concludes the meeting. We are adjourned.
Call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, August 26, 2024. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Counselor Stapleton,
Here.
Counselor Nishioka, here. Counselor Phillips,
Here.
Counselor Gwynn,
Here.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Here.
Counselor Hoy,
Here.
Counselor Nordike, here. Counselor Varney,
Here.
Mayor Hoy.
Here. All right. Councilor Nishioka, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Microphone, please.
Thank you. Yes, we do. I move for the additions to our meeting.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor?
Yes, we have the addition of the work session from last meeting report from our city staff.
For item 5A.
That is correct, 5A.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Gwynn,
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Aye.
Counselor Hoy,
Aye.
Counselor Nordike, Counselor Varney,
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton,
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka,
Aye.
Counselor Phillips,
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. We're now on to council and city manager comment. Do we have any this evening? I will start just by, I just wanted to thank Councilors Nishioka and Gonzalez for joining me yesterday at the Oregon State Fair. We volunteered at the Salem Kawagoe Sister City booth selling water for the day. It's their only fundraiser for our Sister City program. And I had a great time, and I really appreciate you both showing up, so thank you. Are there any other comments? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I know back to school is upon us. I have been mentoring some first-generation college-bound students, and it is just incredibly heartwarming to all the first-generation college students out there starting their freshman year. I wish you the very best. I know it's scary and anxiety-inducing to start college, especially for anyone, but especially if no one in your family has been. So I just encourage you to find your peers, find your support network, and lean on your loved ones, your mentors, your coaches, your teachers, because we're all quietly rooting for you. I also wanted to say, earlier today, I attended the swearing-in ceremony for 4 new Salem police officers. As I understand it, our chief said that we've hired 15 new officers so far this year, which is great. Nationally, it's been very difficult for police departments to recruit new folk. So the fact that they've had 15 this year they've done very well. It was really heartwarming to see the families show up. There were all ages, including a couple of babies in the audience, who were there to support our 4 new members of our police department. That include individuals who are lateraling in from another police department, one individual who has already served our country in the military, and more. So it was really cool to see these folks, because when we're in budget meetings, it looks like numbers on a spreadsheet, but the people who actually staff our departments are so much more than that. So it was really wonderful. And if you have not been to a swearing-in ceremony, I understand there'll be another one coming up, and I'm sure the police department will be notifying you of future opportunities to attend and show your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there further comments? All right. We are on to proclamations. We're going to do a bit of a hybrid proclamation tonight, where Councilor Varney will be reading the proclamation, and I'll be presenting it to Alice Laviolette of the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. If you would come on up, and the others, if you have others with you, you're welcome. You're all welcome up here. Hello. Welcome. Thank you. You're Alice? I am. Great. Come on up. Just spread out here so the camera can see us all. All right. Councilor Varney, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so very much. It really is an honor as a member of the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk County. It's an honor to be able to read this proclamation, so thank you. Okay, whereas National Voter Registration Day is a day to honor civic unity and an opportunity to set aside differences, enjoy the rights and opportunities we all share as Americans, and celebrate our democracy. And whereas voting is the foremost right and responsibility of citizens of the United States of America. And whereas for any democracy to work, all eligible citizens must have access to free, nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, and be able to vote for their elected representatives without barriers in free and fair elections. And whereas the Oregon legislature has enacted constitutional protections listed in the Oregon Voter Bill of Rights that ensure all eligible Oregonians, including felons released from custody, have the right to vote regardless of race, ethnicity, disability, or housing status. And whereas the state of Oregon requires eligible voters to be registered by October 15th, which is 21 days in advance of our November 5th, 2024 general election. Now, therefore, the mayor of the city of Salem, Chris Hoy, does hereby proclaim September 17th, 2024 as National Voter Registration Day, and encourage all citizens to participate in the many nonpartisan voter registration activities in Mary and Polk counties, to check your voter registration status, update it as necessary, and be prepared to make your voice heard and your vote count in the November 5th, 2024 general election, dated this 26th day of August, 2024.
Thank you. You're the one. You get the microphone over here. You have the floor.
The League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk County want to thank our mayor, city council, and staff for their support of the National Voter Registration Day proclamation this September 17th, and encourage all U.S. citizens to register and then vote by November 5th, 2024. For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been a grassroots, nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in all levels of our government. We work to protect and expand voter rights for all U.S. citizens. We help voters understand the major political issues through our voter education service, such as candidate forums, locally produced in cooperation with Capital Community Media, our Speakers Bureau, our printed LWV voter guide in both English and Spanish, and our digital online resource for candidates and ballot issues called vote411.org. We hope to see you at our kids' booth, voting booth, at the Salem Art Fair in September, and the League members will be at the Salem Library on September 7th, and then at senior centers around our area helping registration. September 17th, sorry. Thank you for it. Members of the League of Women Voters are open to all, membership is open to all people who are 16 or older. We thank you for today.
Thank you. Absolutely. Please stop at home.
You're going to just call on the members of the audience if someone wants to speak at public comment.
We'll see. Oh. All right. Thank you, Councilor Varney. We are now on to public comment. We have nobody signed up. Is there anybody who intended to sign up but who wanted to speak to council but wasn't able to sign up? Okay. Councilor Nishioka, we're on to the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councilor, to your motion.
Yes, thank you. The consent calendar includes 3.1A, the August 12th, 2024 draft city council meeting minutes, 3.3A, 24-334, authorizing the city manager to submit an application to the Project Development Assistance Incentives of Renewable Energy Program, and, if successful, enter into an agreement with Energy Trust of Oregon to accept the funds. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke. Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. We are on to public hearings, item 4A. So we will open a public hearing amending the Salem Revised Code, Chapter 70 and Chapter 71.
The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to receive testimony regarding amendments to Chapter 70 Utilities and Chapter 71 Stormwater of the Salem Revised Code. The criteria applicable to the proposal are set forth in SRC 110.085. Testimony must be directed toward the identified criteria or other criteria the person believes to apply to the decision. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation, followed by testimony from the following. The applicable neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes each, and other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see we have Mr. Chandler at the lectern. So, Mr. Chandler, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, it is my pleasure to be here. I'm Robert Chandler, Assistant Director of Public Works, and I'm here to talk to you about proposed amendments to Salem Revised Code, Chapter 70, titled Utilities, and Chapter 71, Stormwater. Big picture, there's requirements that we have to incorporate into these amendments that are given to us by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. A little more about that later. First, though, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the contributors from the Stormwater Advisory Group. This is a multi-talented, multi-positioned group of people. We had engineers, home builders, everyone was an environmental advocate, I will say. We had an architect, our own Councilor Nishioka sat on this, and this group met 7 times over a 5-month period. We talked primarily about design standards, how we meet the requirements of the code, but we also talked about the code itself and changes that had to be incorporated. I also acknowledge the support from Brown and Caldwell and OTAC to engineering consultant firms in the area, as well as at least 3 departments were involved in this: our own Public Works, Community Planning and Development, and in the City Attorney's Office. Before I get much further into this, I thought I would do a bit of decoding here. We were less diligent in the staff report and others on our terminology. I'll try to use the term municipal stormwater permit or municipal stormwater discharge permit. There's a bit of an alphabet soup involved with this. I'll begin with Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Oregon DEQ. They're the ones who issued us the permit. The permit is issued to us under the authority of the Federal Clean Water Act, which actually itself is shorthand for the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act amendments. I'm looking at the City Attorney. Water Quality Act amendments, and the Clean Water Act itself. Is issued under a program called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. This is a program that different entities, both cities, other municipalities, industries, wastewater treatment plant works, and others get a permit to discharge into receiving waters of the state, in our case, the creeks, Willamette River, some more wetlands. Our permit is issued under the NPDES program, and it covers our municipal separate storm sewer system. So occasionally you will see in text and in writing it's an MS4 permit, an NPDES permit, an NPDES MS4 permit. Now you know the code. I'm going to try to call it municipal stormwater permit, issued to us by DEQ. So big picture, we're proposing amendments to Salem Revised Code, Chapter 70, Utilities. Actually, just one section of that talking about definitions. And then Chapter 71, which is stormwater. Let me get caught up. The purpose of the proposed amendments is to comply with the requirements of the permit and lessons learned that we have picked up over the past 10 years since we first created SRC Chapter 71. In Chapter 70, all definitions primarily to align with the municipal stormwater permit and to support some of the new provisions in Chapter 71. And in Chapter 71 itself, and this is a major change, it involves changes to thresholds and performance standards for development and redevelopment projects. And that's the core of the changes in SRC Chapter 71. We also picked up some lessons learned, a few intriguing typographical errors that have survived 10 years. We fixed those. And the code itself has to be effective November 1st per our permit. Unlike other ordinances that are effective 30 days after, this code has a specific effective date of November 1, 2024. There you go. It we talked about stormwater flow control facilities and stormwater treatment facilities. I thought I'd give you a picture or two of what those are. This is a stormwater flow control facility. It's for a major subdivision located out in the vicinity of Auburn Street and Cordon Road up in northeast Salem. This is a right-of-way planter box, a treatment facility. It's about 400 feet from here on Commercial Street. And this is a combined facility. It's over at Wren Heights, not far from Salem Heights Avenue. It does both flow control and treatment. So now you know what we're talking about with stormwater flow control and treatment facilities. The proposed changes in SRC 70, several things. We fixed some of the cross references. I mean, why should I define earth material if Chapter 82 does a mighty fine job of doing it? We clarified some of those cross references. We did some alignment to make sure the definitions in Chapter 70 aligned with some of the definitions in the stormwater permit. To meet the requirements, primarily new development and redevelopment requirements, we modified some definitions to account for the threshold changes. We added new definitions. Flow control exempt area. I talked about the requirement to have flow control facilities. There's some receiving waters that really don't care. Flow control reduces the peak flows, reduces the volumes, it addresses flooding and addresses damage to creeks. The Willamette River doesn't care about flow getting into it, so we have some areas, for example, where you don't have to meet the flow control standards. And lastly, we relocated some aspects that are currently in code into the administrative rule, or we will. There's no reason for council to codify the size of the storm event, for example. That is what we did in Chapter 70. In Chapter 71, again, combination of lessons learned in compliance with the permit. This section about fee in lieu, if you can't fit a facility on your project site, you can pay a fee in lieu of construction. We expanded how that money can be used to not only construct a new facility, but we can use it to retrofit an existing facility to take the flows. It was a good move. The permit tells what you cannot discharge. It also has a list of what you can discharge. So we adjusted what is permissible also in Chapter 71. Things like firefighting wash water, high fire hydrant flushing water, uncontaminated condensate, things like that. We fixed a quirk in the definitions for a land development or land division that you actually have to install both flow control and treatment if it's required. It was a little ambiguity that we've dealt with in the past. The current code talks about single-family residential projects. That was how we addressed certain requirements. We've expanded that to basically got rid of single families, call it residential projects, and that now addresses not only single family and dual family, but everything with middle housing, 3-family, 4-family, and accessory dwelling units. Requirements for city projects. This is kind of an interesting thing. Well, I think it is. The city doesn't apply for permits like everybody else. And when you apply for a permit other than the city, that vests you in the current codes at that time. Since we don't have apply for permits, there's a question about what code requirements do you have to comply with. And so we incorporated requirements in basically do city projects have to comply with the new requirements as opposed to the old one. And we tied them to things like if the council has already approved this capital improvement program funding, if it was part of a grant fund, if it was part of a bond measure, a voter-approved bond measure, things like that, that vest that project in the old requirements, not mandating the new requirements. So that's been in Chapter 71. Flow control, I talked about flow control exemption areas. That's now incorporated also in the standards for 71. Treatment facilities per our permit. The water quality design storm has to be retained, and minimized through a combination of infiltration and evapotranspiration. We put that in. So that's kind of the highlights of the major changes we've had. We were pretty diligent about our outreach. I briefed the home builders back in February about the changes coming. The home builders provided a representative to sit on the Stormwater Advisory Committee. That was Rick Massey from Richard Massey Construction. The Stormwater Advisory Group, I already mentioned, they met 7 times over a 5-month period, is a great group. the final product is much better with this involvement than it started. I'll say that. Had a public website since July 15. It includes not only the staff report from first reading, and now as a staff report from this public hearing, a question and answer period, contact information. DLCD notice is required no less than 35 days. We submitted that notice. Public hearing notice August 1st. That's the one that goes to neighborhood associations, to Marion County and Polk County boards of commissioners, and to planning commissions, a few others. Salem Reporter. We were the first project to publish our public hearing notice in the Salem Reporter. We moved away from the Statesman Journal. It's great. They published it once, and it just stays on the website. We don't have to read every Monday. It's there. They're a great team to work with. I've had hard copies both in the library and the customer service center since August 14. And last week I gave a courtesy briefing to the Planning Commission on Tuesday at their meeting. These are the key, the process, first reading back in July. Thank you very much. We're here at the public hearing. Subject to successful conclusion of the public hearing, we'll be back September 23rd for second reading and enactment. So staff recommendation after we complete the public hearing is that council advance ordinance number 9, TAC 24 to second reading for enactment. And I believe that's my last slide. So subject to your questions, that completes my briefing.
Thank you. We have no members of the public signed up for public testimony on this item. Is there anybody who wanted to testify in this public hearing? Okay, we'll go straight to questions then for staff. Are there questions of staff?
I meant to note that we had no public comments from online either.
Nobody? Oh, Councilor Stapleton, there you are.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions for you. Did you receive any comments from the Planning Commission?
We didn't get any comments of questioning the procedure. There was a lot of discussion at the agenda item prior to my briefing that involved stormwater, so we talked a little bit about stormwater. I had the opportunity to talk about what is a 100-year design storm and why you can get more than one every 100 years. And a modest soapbox opportunity to say, when in doubt, buy flood insurance, because floodwaters don't know where the city has drawn the floodwater boundaries.
Yeah, or pay attention to that 100-year calendar.
Exactly right.
A second question was about the requirements for the city projects. I guess my concern, is this only about stormwater, or is this really encompassing all of the different projects that the city does?
This is only in the stormwater chapter 71, so it's only stormwater. It's only requirements for when you have to incorporate stormwater treatment or stormwater flow control facility in your project.
Okay, interesting. And do you see any downside to that? Do you see, can you give me some examples of maybe something that would not be a great outcome for us with this? Or do you only see an upside?
I only see upsides to most things. The issue is that when we come to council for a capital improvement program for approval of the improvement plan, or when we go out to voters for a bond measure or we apply for a grant, we estimate the cost based on the codes at that time. And so this gives us some degree of certainty that that there's not going to be an increase in the cost because of these new requirements. So it's a good thing. It's actually appropriate. It roughly mirrors what a private project would experience as far as vesting in the current requirements.
Yeah, I guess my concern would be a bond can take a while to spend down, and those projects could be, a decade different from when it was passed with the voters to when it's constructed. And sometimes a lot can change within that 10 years. I'm guessing that common sense is going to play a good, strong role here with the city employees, and where adjustments need to be made, they will be made. I'm guessing. That was a question.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I think most of the changes, among the big changes is that the threshold triggering these requirements drops from 2,000 square feet of new and replaced impervious surface to 5,000 square feet. And I think almost all of our projects are already above that threshold. So it has really very little impact on the previous cost estimates we put together. And I'm actually checking out with the city engineer for nonverbal cues. We got it.
All right, sounds good. I at first kind of got triggered because I thought this was all of these. It was impacting more than what it is.
Understood.
Because I was thinking about the TSP update and how if we're kind of locked into when the bond happened and we're updating our TSP, but this is stormwater only. So that was answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions of staff? Councilor Phillips.
This isn't like a focused question, so it might be a little bit challenging. Broadly speaking, as a counselor, I have seen over time how the city of Salem has made improvements in how we handle stormwater. And I guess my question has to do with, maybe you could comment on, we've recently gotten like the next designation on our target for like getting lower insurance rate because of how well we handle our stormwater. In what way does this thing that we're doing tonight in moving, this new permitting process forward overlap with those efforts to handle stormwater so well and qualify things for like better insurance rates?
Thank you for that question, comment. I'll interpret. The Federal Environment or Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has a program called the Community Rating System, or CRS. And that system, which 1,740, I think, communities nationwide participate in the CRS, Community Rating System program. And it basically evaluates municipalities, agencies, and how you regulate development in the floodways and floodplain. And how well you do, you get points. How many points you get classification. Salem manages development in the floodplain very, very well. We are in the top 1% of those 1,740 some odd communities participating in the Community Rating System program. At each level you get, every member in Salem gets a discount on the flood insurance premiums. We're at the point, I want to say we get 35% discount. We are CRS score class 3. There's only 2 other classes above us. And I think there's only 12 or 24 communities among those 1,700 plus that are that good. And this, the permit, the code continues to support that with our flow control requirements for the higher volume storms. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. I like to highlight how awesome we are. And it's nice to hear that we're in the top 1%. So thank you for that confirmation.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions for staff? You're not allowed to ask questions. You are staff. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just following up on the FEMA conversation, I know I was at a meeting last week with the County Commission and our friends from Kaiser, and they mentioned new regulations that are coming down from FEMA, and I'm wondering if you or Robin could speak to those regulations and how they might be impacted by what we're talking about this evening.
I will defer to our floodplain manager, Robin Dahlke, to talk about what's pending from FEMA on that. Robin?
Good call. I would have done the same.
Hi, good evening, Robin Dahlke. I'm Community Planning and Development Operations Manager, Floodplain Administrator, and I attended the second of a 2-series webinar focused on communities in Oregon. I think about 70% of Oregon communities are going to be impacted by these changes that FEMA announced about 3 weeks ago and published a model ordinance last week. So we've had very little time to review this ordinance, but this is related to a decade-old process, a lawsuit filed by NIMS related to protection of endangered species, salmonoid, and species impacted by the waters of the state. And Washington experienced some of these changes more than a decade ago, but it will impact all of our special flood hazard areas in Salem. And it's focused on looking at no adverse impact to any development activity in those areas. And what we don't know yet is how we will present or demonstrate there's no adverse impact. I think it's going to be clearer for new development sites, but when you have renovation, repair, and small addition projects. I actually posed questions to the FEMA state coordinator to ask how those will be addressed without any kind of guidance documents. And the response was, we'll need to look into that. We're working on that. We will look at getting technical guidance for communities, particularly communities that do not have funding and support. So those changes will have to be effective November of 2025, but we have to pick an approach by December 1st. I have an appointment on Dan's calendar, city attorney, to discuss what approach we think we're taking. But this has been a shock, I think, to a lot of communities in Oregon, and I've had very little time to digest it. But we will be back, I assure you, in front of council soon, talking about how those impacts might affect our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to check in with Councilor Varney. I saw your hand up earlier, but it's not up now, so I just wanted to make sure if you had a question that you had an opportunity.
Well, thank you. I actually, it was more of a question, comment. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for the presentation and for the work of the team that put all these changes together. Green stormwater infrastructure has been on one of those items that I'm very, very interested in. And I was happy to see, and maybe I should ask, in SRC 71.100 on treatment facilities, on letter C, the treatment facility performance standard, I guess it was good to see that instead of capture and treat, we now have retain and minimize offsite discharge by utilizing infiltration and evapotranspiration of at least 80% of the average runoff volume. So I guess my question is, how is that 80% of the average runoff volume, as predicted by the design storm event for the portion requiring treatment, how is that even determined? I was just curious.
Is determined by collecting a lot of data on storm events, running it through a lot of computer models to figure out how frequently does that storm event of that volume and that duration occur, and then translate that into a 2-year, statistically every 2-year, 5-year, 25-year, 100-year storm event. And just to clarify, a 100-year storm event is not a storm event that occurs once every 100 years. It's a storm that every year is a 1% chance of it happening. So that is statistics, Counselor, that you get those storm event sizes. And the 80%, I don't have the numbers here, but the water quality design storm is calculated based on that.
Okay. Because we've seen so many more fluctuations in terms of our climate changing, and we've seen these high flows. Has that impacted this at all?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat it?
Well, I'm thinking we've seen a lot of runoff, we've seen flooding, we've had, between drought and then all the rain and storms we get, we've seen a lot more fluctuation in water levels in the past, I guess. I guess I don't really have a question, but this would obviously change some of those models. And I was wondering how that is incorporated, or if it is.
I think your question has to do with how we're incorporating changes in climate and changes in rainfall patterns and all of that. We are not directly doing that with this set of code revisions. I expect over time additional data will be collected and we'll get a better idea of what really is a 100-year storm now. Storm events don't always coordinate well with statistics, but that's the idea. We collect data, we get an estimate, we put it into a model, we estimate what is it that's necessary in order to reduce risks of flooding or reduce the adverse harms from high flows from our projects. I will note, however, that one of the things I did tell Planning Commission is you can't take a pristine river valley and then rip that up and replace it with a city with 185,000 people and not have things happen to your water. We'll get flooding by flood insurance. The unexpected happens. Water doesn't know, like I said, it doesn't know where we drew lines.
Okay, thank you for the information. And really, all these changes are just great. Appreciate it.
Councilor Gwynn.
So I'm curious for new developments. This is taking effect November 1 of 2024. If a developer has submitted a subdivision application, is this ordinance going to impact them? Like an application that's in process? Just curious.
That's a good question. My understanding is that when you submit a complete land use application, you are vested in the code requirements at that time. Okay, that's got the answer.
Councillor Hoy.
Thank you. My question's for Robin Dahlke, if you don't mind. Is this FEMA, would you call it an order or whatever? Is this happening in all 50 states, or is it just Oregon's lucky day, or what?
Oregon's lucky day. The lawsuit was specific to Oregon.
That's fascinating. And it happens to coincide with a housing shortage and a lot of other things that the governor is well aware of, and she wants us all to build so we can meet those needs. Is she in touch with FEMA? Is there any kind of negotiation involved, or this is just a thing?
A lot of questions that were asked at the webinar series were from constituents with concerns about land use laws in Oregon and housing shortage and housing productions that the state has required us to address. So in short, kind of the answer was we are looking into that, and we are working with our legislative and state bodies to discuss how this will affect individual communities. But I think the approach is that development activity will still be allowed, and so there isn't a thought that housing will be affected. It just will have to demonstrate that there's no adverse impact. So other measures are taken to protect the protected species, particularly the fish. And so if there is a development site in the floodplain, rather than bringing in fill, for example, to elevate the structure, they're looking at alternative measures like building on piers to allow ingress, egress for fish passage under the building. So unique to this area, not something that we've seen developers or contractors use for construction methods, but that's the kind of information we're looking for, more guidance, technical guidance on how we will approach that. And it could be that a biologist would look at a site and say, this is already bad habitat, there's nothing that needs to be protected here, proceed with housing development. And those are the kind of things that we're not quite sure of how that will look, especially in Salem and Oregon as a whole.
Right, and just to comment, but it seems prohibitive that everything's going to get more expensive and take more time because of this many more rules and regulations on that.
Well, and I'll say specifically ask the question of a residential home builder just trying to do an addition. They can't afford to hire a biologist to do an evaluation. So how are we going to address this at that level? And then even at larger development, that's where we're looking for technical guidance and support. And a lot of communities ask that question, where's the funding? And the impression I got is that there will be support, there will be funding, and there will be guidance. We just don't have it yet. So, okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for staff? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. This isn't a question, but I will say again, as I have said before, it was my pleasure to serve on the SWAG, the Stormwater Advisory Group. It was a great group. They really came in asking a lot of questions. They had a lot of very specific data, and I will tell you, they challenged Dr. Chandler on a regular basis, and I feel that the outcome was really good. Everyone was really great in cooperating, and I also want to thank Robin Dahlke with all of the great work you've done. I, who live on a little bit of a hill, I got what I want to say, water damage insurance. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for staff? All right, we will close the public hearing. And it's time for a motion. Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I move to advance the ordinance to second reading for the enactment.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Stapleton. Councilor, anything further?
I don't think I need to add anything further to this discussion.
Thank you. Will the recorder please call the roll? Unless is there any further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Hoy.
Aye.
Councillor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councillor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton?
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka? Aye. Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye, motion passes. All right, we're on to special orders of business, item 5, so 5A, and I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Keith Staley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This evening, we're back here in front of you to continue our conversation that we started last week about our revenue task force work and moving that work forward. We look forward to receiving your direction on our proposals, which we think are responsive to the direction that we received on Monday of last week. And let's go to the next slide. Can't thank you, Courtney. We know that we need to learn more from our community, what services and programs are priorities, and we will do that as part of polling our community. We know that we are interested in building trust with our community and confidence that the information that we have can be relied on and is accurate, and we'll do that by validating our 5-year financial forecast and by conducting performance auditing. We know that we need to connect and engage with our community, and we have a proposal on how to move that forward. Courtney will take it from here, and Elizabeth will provide a supporting role. Colleen is unable to join us this evening, so questions that you have will be fielded by those here in the room. So Courtney, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hoy, members of the City Council. Tonight, I'm going to be walking you through this 4-point plan. And the design, I just want to make sure that the design is rooted in the feedback that we received as Mr. Staley just demonstrated. And the question before you tonight that's in the staff report, more detailed, is about whether to advance this 4-point plan.
Courtney, if I could interrupt you for just one brief moment,
Please.
I apologize. Could you be sure and introduce yourself for the record?
Did I not? I'm sorry. I said thank you so much,
You did.
Mayor Hoy, members
so
of the City
close.
Council, and I am Courtney Knox-Bush, your Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for the clarification. I did share screen.
You did.
So I'm
You did
doing
great.
pretty good. And so what I want to start with is just sort of what we've heard. And so when we got together last week, we heard that there was support among you for polling to understand the community priorities and preferences to move forward. We understood that there was support for furthering the community engagement and outreach on priorities for a potential future funding issue. We also understood, as City Manager Staley just mentioned, that there was interest in validating the 5-year financial forecast and examining our performance and spending in some key priority program areas. I feel like we could do a better job making what we've done so far more visible. And then we understood that you wanted to hear from us about this plan that we're putting forward this evening. I want to make sure to mention that we believe the work plan will result in some clear direction about community priorities and preferences. We also think it will help us share in a more visible way what we have been doing and what we will do to help us build that community trust and legitimacy. So the 4-point plan, it looks at, the first item is about polling, and that's again about community preferences and priorities. The second bit is about performance auditing, and this is where we want to focus on efficiency and effectiveness and the cost of priority programs. The third piece is about advancing a financial forecast validation with a third-party support. And then the last bit is, again, about advancing communications and community engagement. And Elizabeth will be up to speak to the detail on that issue. So in terms of understanding community priorities and preferences, should you approve this work plan this evening, the City Council will be directing the City Manager to use current budget authority in this fiscal year, which we have waiting for an annual community satisfaction survey. We would take that off the work program for the year and instead advance this particular poll that we've discussed last week. If approved this evening, we would have the results available in a work session for your consideration in October 21st would be when that would come forward. The second item is about conducting more performance auditing, and I want to talk for just a minute about what that means, what that is. Performance and internal auditing, that's where we invite a third-party auditor to come and to look in detail about, it's about specific standards for governance and government accountability. But we would ask them to look at some of the details around efficiency, effectiveness, and spending in some key priority areas. And we would invite the Finance Committee to help us identify those priorities. We think we can do this by reorganizing the work program that we have for this current year. And so there's no additional cost. We would just change our priorities around. And we think that we can get at least 3 program or performance audits, internal audits, completed in priority areas this year within existing funds. And we can talk more about that as we go. Again, did I already say using the Finance Committee to help us really get clear on which priorities? Because again, in that limited financial position that we're in, we really want to make sure we're using it to identify bigger citywide impact issues and problems. The next bit is about a financial forecast. And I want to talk really quickly about what those are. Again, that's a best guess for a 5-year look ahead, and it looks at trends and a whole bunch of other assumptions about what's going on in the economy and the market conditions. And we usually put that before the Budget Committee and Council in January of every year. And what we're talking about doing is looking at the quality and the validity of those assumptions, checking in for calculation errors that might be occurring, and comparing to, again, government standards, how we're doing the work, and then testing the assumptions and the methodologies. This really looks at costing models for positions and all the plans that Council has adopted and how we can make all of that happen within the first 5 years. It looks at revenue and expenditure estimates and assumptions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth to talk through the community engagement element. Oops, glasses.
So, greetings, City Council and Mayor. I'm Elizabeth Kennedy Wong, the Chief Communications Officer. So to talk a little bit about why we want to be developing this kind of robust community engagement and communications plan, both of these elements are about how we connect with our community and how we build relationships and how we ultimately earn trust. We want the community to have confidence and trust in our ability to deliver the services and programs that they want and the ones that they deserve. And we know that trust is not built on a single engagement or activity, but trust is earned over time and after repeated experiences. So we want to start creating those repeated experiences through these efforts. This piece of the work plan is about connecting with the community, meeting them in parks, playgrounds, at community organizations, and in public forums. We're developing an outreach and engagement plan that allows us to meet people where they're at. We want to go to them. We want to show them that their knowledge, experience, and expertise are important to us. We want to share information with them about the programs of the city, and we want to learn from them what their priorities are. We also want to learn from them what's working well and what they would like to see differently. And the interesting thing about all this work is it takes a tremendous amount of work to speak clearly and briefly. So in order to get to that place where we're really able to connect effectively with the community, we have a lot of work to do to prepare for that. We want to start working to develop materials that are simple and accessible. We need to build contact lists and start scheduling meetings and presentations. And we also need to build our newsletter readership so that it becomes the trusted source of information from the city of Salem. So we're working to build those connections and systems to share information with our constituents, build relationships, and ultimately earn the trust of our constituents. And the good thing is the work that we're doing for this effort is really building the foundation for our communications program and work for years to come. So that's what we're doing, and that's what we're asking you to support. And to bring it all together, we're asking you to consider the staff recommendation, which is to authorize the city manager to initiate this work plan to better understand our community's priorities for city services.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am supportive in general of these concepts. I just want to help highlight a couple of the things that we've been talking about. And one has to do with what kind of audit are we looking at? And we all have different understandings of what audits mean. There are financial audits, there are performance audits, there are things like cost savings audits. And when I think of the kind of audits that would be a benefit for members of the Finance Committee and members of this council more generally to look at are the ones that have to do with finding those hidden efficiencies that can arise in any entity, whether it's a for-profit business or a government. This is the way that I approach this is with the best of intentions. I don't believe that there's a single member of our government who is trying to create wasteful spending. I don't believe that for a second. There are nonetheless ways that you can have someone bring in a fresh set of eyes and just see if there's a different way of doing things or a more efficient or cost-effective way of doing things. So if we're going to be talking about audits, and if we're going to be paying someone to conduct these audits, I really want to stress, to me, it's important that we show to the public that we are spending our money as efficiently as possible, as wisely as possible. For us to say that with a straight face, that we've cut to the bone. And I've been in some really great neighborhood association meetings with Councilor Nishioka, where she's done a really great job explaining that. And I think that there are still some more folks that we got to bring on board to believe in us, right? And I know that we counselors work really hard. We go to our neighborhood meetings. We tell them what all the information that we see from budget committee, our sidebars with each other, our conversations with our chief financial officer. And what we are hearing is that some more information from an objective person who doesn't work for the city, who isn't as close to it, who hasn't been looking at the same numbers over and over again. Just a fresh set of eyes, I think, would be really helpful. So I just want to highlight that for me, when I'm looking at supporting funding for auditing of our city, I'm looking for ways that can help us save money, even if it's 50,000 here, 100 grand there. I understand we have a ginormous budget, and that's a technical term, but that's real money to real people. It's more money than most people will ever see in their lives on an independent month. So I think we should definitely lean into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there further comments or questions? Councilor Phillips.
First comment, I think that this is an excellent summary of what I've heard over the last year, and especially after last week, the input that we've gotten, not just from the city Salem Council, but like the task force that met on revenue. So this is good. I think it's simply laid out. It makes sense to me. I hope it's intuitive to the rest of the community, and I think that these 4 steps in some way have to be done. To kind of facilitate communication and gathering information. It looks like 2 of the 4 steps have some funding associated with them, and it's just step 3 and 4 up about $10,000 mentioned. And I think last week we heard that in place of doing the community satisfaction survey, which is about $40,000 a year every year to get a statistically significant sample size, we just swapped that out so it wouldn't be a new cost. I just want to make sure, is that the dollars and cents we're kind of talking about in terms of scope?
Yes, the only thing that isn't unfunded at this point is the community education and information and engagement work that Elizabeth Kennedy Wong spoke about. And we're estimating that about $10,000.
Okay, so I like it. So I'm supportive. I think I've said a couple times that I envision us going big when possible, and I keep using the last big thing I remember us doing, which was the comprehensive update, which was a multi-year process. We knew it was coming. It's a much more, you do it every few decades. I agree with my colleagues that we don't necessarily have that much time, so I get that time is of the issue, but I do think it's going to be important to go broad-based and to really bring people in to the process, actively seek them like we did and got awards for doing during the Our Salem process when we updated our comprehensive plan. But fully acknowledge, I don't want to confuse anybody, like we don't have 2 years to start fixing this problem. So I think that it's imperative we move forward now, and I like what I'm seeing here.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Varney.
There. Thank you very much. One of the questions I had was in regards to polling. I mean, overall, I support this work plan. I just was curious about some of the particulars, some of the details behind it. So with the poll, I realize that's coming up very quickly. Is there a leadership team or a task force, or are the poll questions that are going to be used, are they going to be run through some sort of a committee at all?
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Councilor Varney. In order to
Could you hold on for a minute, Mr. Staley? We're getting some sort of secondary audio from somewhere.
Yeah.
Do we have any additional folks with their lights on that need to be turned off?
No.
I would say.
Councilor Varney, is that coming from your room? All right. Oh, there it stopped. All right, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Staley. Where were we? You were answering a question.
Polling.
About polling and who's going
Sorry.
to, how those questions are going to be developed and who's going to be the oversight of that process.
Yes. We need to have this polling out on the street as soon as possible in order to avoid confusion and conflict with the upcoming presidential election. So we have hired DHM. They are a contractor of record. DHM is going to, they understand what the council's desire is in regards to polling, and they are going to work with us to develop the questions and the polling methodology in order to achieve the results that we have asked for. There is not a committee that we will be returning to with these polling questions. There simply is not time. Literally, we will be finalizing this. We need to finalize this by September 5th in order to get it on the street by September 10th, which is what our polling expert is asking us to do. Going beyond that starts to slip into, again, that potential conflict with the presidential election and that inability to get people's attention. So there you go.
Okay. Well, I know I brought this up, I believe, previously. I'm looking at, okay, everything else is paid for except for, we have funded, except for the community engagement. I would wish there was some way we could find out what that community engagement should look like. I mean, could we put a question in that said, oh, I don't know, like what information would you need from the city in order to consider supporting a levy? I mean, can we ask something like that to help guide our education process?
If you're referring to just general information, we certainly plan to have multiple opportunities for people to provide input into this process. As to the poll, obviously the poll is going to be scientific and it's going to be specific to the 400 and some people that DHM will be contacting. So yes, there'll be multiple ways for people to input. Again, primarily what we're looking for from the poll, of course, is a statistically valid response that we can come back to the city council in October and say, this is what we heard from our community, this is the direction that they provided, this is what they will support by way of a levy or not, and this is what the rate and the services that they're willing to support would be.
Okay, thank you. I guess that answers part of my question. Thanks.
Are there additional questions? Councilor Gonzalez.
You know, when talking about polling, I think we need to poll the next council, you know, just that maybe there's some kind of bridge committee that takes into account the next council, because, you know, from our last meeting, I think we all agreed that the whole council had to be on board with whatever was going to go to the public. You know, so that's one of my concerns, is that, you know, unfortunately our work as a team here is going to change. The team's going to look different as of the end of the year. You know, so I want to make sure that we're also taking into consideration the next group, even though they're not at this table today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. Just for clarity, the next council would be approving whatever ballot would go forward. It won't be approved by this current council. It would be approved by the 2025 edition of the Salem City Council.
Are there further questions? Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. I understood what Councilor Neudijk said, and I agree. What kind of audit are we after, and what kind of information are we going to receive from it? Because I know we'd had Moss Adams do this kind of thing when we were trying to gain support for the payroll tax, and it all leaned itself toward, we need more money, and we're going to have to cut these positions and these things. This audit, it seems to me, I just want to understand the difference between performance and cost, and I want fresh information, not more of the same style of delivery, which is to maybe compare us to another city and say what it is we need, rather than just attempting to prove the need, to provide analysis, and again, to build trust with the community. So how do we define the audit?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Hoy. Just real quick, there was a number of emails that went back and forth today in regards to performance audit versus cost audit, and frankly, I really wasn't able to find any specific information from generally accepted governmental accounting standards in relationship to cost auditing. There's lots of information in regards to performance auditing. There's lots of RFPs regarding performance auditing. So I think within the overarching definition of performance auditing, cost is part of performance auditing. And let me just read to you from the GASB standards, are generally accepted accounting standards from the Governmental Accounting Association. We conduct performance and internal audits in accordance with generally accepted governmental accounting standards in support of governmental accountability. The concept of accountability for use of public resources and governmental authority is key to our nation's governing processes. Management and officials entrusted with public resources are responsible for carrying the public functions and providing services to the public effectively, efficiently, economically, ethically, and equitably within the context of the statutory boundaries and specific governmental programs. That's how GASB defines performance auditing. We're going to develop a specific scope of service. We're going to come back to the Finance Committee and review that scope of service before we move forward. We're not suggesting that this is going to be a complete organization-wide performance audit. That would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and would take months or years to complete. Our budget our general fund budget alone is $190 million, in which we have 100 different program areas. So what our suggestion will be, this is a spoiler alert for the Finance Committee, but our suggestion will be that we start with those entities and programs that have an organization-wide impact. Things like our IT system, for example, or the city manager's office, and that we look at how that entity is organized, who are the people that are doing the work, are they the right people doing that work, what are the associations and the connections they have to the rest of the organization, and that yes, cost is a significant component of that work. So again, our staff recommendation is that we work with the Finance Committee to clarify and before we move forward with the scope of work. Our intention is to use Moss Adams for this work. One of their expertises is performance auditing. Of the corporate entity that is Moss Adams, one of their corporate specialties is performance auditing for governmental agencies. So I think we're well situated to use them if we have a well-defined scope of work for them. And again, working with the Finance Committee, I believe that we can do that, and we can get in an incremental way the work that we need done. Again, we're starting down a multiple process and multiple year project potentially to get all of the information that we need. But I think by starting at a programmatic level that is enterprise-wide programs, again, like IT or our risk program or the city manager's office, we can develop kind of a pilot, if you will, or a model for doing this work. Again, working with the Finance Committee and with Council about how this work rolls out and how we can use this work to inform and help educate ourselves and the community about the work we do.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I guess to ask one further question that I'm hearing from folks, is there a reason why this particular task was not put out for an RFP, with an RFP? Like, who else might perform this audit?
I'm sorry, didn't mean to talk over you. Primarily that Moss Adams is a contractor of record. We have them under contract right now. We have available scope within the current contract in order to do this work on a limited basis. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's tens of thousands of dollars. So just from an efficiency perspective of not having to go through the RFP process, select another vendor, bringing them on board, developing the contract for that work, that's a multi-month process. We don't have multiple months here to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I've been on council, it'll be a couple of years now as of this fall, and I have just, Moss Adams is the go-to. Moss Adams is the go-to consultant for many things, and it seems that the assignments are given to Moss Adams and they bring forth what the city is looking for to sort of provide explanation for the need, whatever the need might be. And I just feel like at this time, it might behoove all of us to have a third party independent of all of that history and work to perform this particular task.
From a staff perspective, we're certainly open to that, but just recognizing what the timing would be with that, it literally would take us 3 months in order to start that process, go through the selection process, advertising the RFP, doing the selection, and bringing them on board and on contract. If that's council's will, we certainly will move in that direction. But again, I think Moss Adams has the expertise. They also have the organizational understanding that is incredibly valuable here. They know who they're talking to, they know the work, they know the right questions to ask, they know where the friction points are. So from my perspective, I think they can do this work efficiently. They don't have to go through a learning process to understand who they're working with and what the work is.
Councilor Varney.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I guess what I wanted to say, I mean, Moss Adams has been doing a great job on the stuff they have. I'm glad that the Finance Committee is going to be working closer with this, because the Finance Committee, maybe working with Moss Adams, could find out more about the approach and the scope and make sure that the needs that are being expressed this evening are addressed. Because I think the question is, are we saving where we can? But I'd like to look at it from the other side, and I think a very important part to point out is identify the areas that we are saving money and the changes we've done over the last 3 years or whatever to do that. So I just wanted to say more of a comment. I'm glad the Finance Committee will be working on this.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you so much. I had a quick question getting back to Councilor Hoy's questions about Moss Adams and the review or the audit. Is the city's goal to have the audit done before we go out to voters for possibly a levy next May?
Yes, it would be our intention to start this work. Again, what we're talking about here this evening is not an A to Z review of every program within the city's general fund or within our budget for that matter. Again, that would be a huge undertaking and would be a multi-month process. So.
Okay, and then how long will the process take with Moss Adams? Having them already under contract, they can kind of get right into the work. How long are they projecting the work to take them?
I would anticipate being able to come back to council with the results by the end of the year for the first project. And then we can, what I would suggest that the Finance Committee would do would be lay out a work plan that would have multiple different programs that would be evaluated. Again, talked about some of this organization-wide, enterprise-wide work, and then working into specific programs. We at a staff level didn't think that starting with code enforcement, for example, would be a lot of value add, but starting with something that has an enterprise-wide impact, like our IT system, like our risk system, like the city manager's office, legal or otherwise, those are the type of programs that we think we should start with. But again, let's work with the Finance Committee and identify what your interests are, and we'll move from there.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with you on kind of taking the money and putting it towards the programs that are really impacting the whole city instead of each individual one. Recognizing that the city does provide so many services that it's going to be really expensive and a lot of time to do an audit over all of the systems. So really prioritizing those that have the far reach is good. But I'm mainly, so I applaud you for what you're thinking, but I'm trying to get at the timing. So if we can get that information with Moss Adams by the end of the year, then I'm guessing that you're going to use that information in some of our community outreach and in some of our kind of building coalition to go out in May for possibly a levy at that point in time. Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely. It starts to tell the story about, can you trust the information that the city is providing you? Is our financial forecast valid? That's a different process, and we are anticipating using a separate third party to do that work, hiring an accountancy to come in and review that work. We'll do that we have contracting authority below $25,000. We anticipate that would be less than $25,000. So we'll hire an accountancy to do that work, and then, of course, we'll engage this performance auditing.
Thank you. And so if we were to bring in somebody new, then that would add another 3 months or so. Instead of Moss Adams doing this work, it would be another maybe 3 months in order to get them on board. So that would bring in the information in March. And if we're going out in May, that doesn't give us a lot of time to utilize that information to gain community support. I'm just trying to verbalize what I'm hearing you say, but kind of between the lines. Am I reading you right?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Our
okay.
hope, again, is to have information that we can use in this process of engaging with our community and telling our story to our community and validating that our forecast is accurate and that the way the city spends its limited resources is efficient, effective, and stands up to performance scrutiny.
Thank you. And my concern, for me personally, I trust Moss Adams. I think they have a great record doing a lot of really good work for us, and totally understand the timing issues and all of that. That's important. I also want to acknowledge what Councillor Hoy is bringing up, and I want to make sure that Councillor Hoy is comfortable moving forward with that, because I would hate for us to spend money that doesn't get us to a place where we're all on the same page and moving forward together. So I think Councillor Hoy being comfortable moving forward is going to be really important for this process, and I don't want it to be a waste of resources if we can't utilize this information to really gain the momentum we need in this room and within the partners that are come alongside us as we move forward towards May. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to the forward. I just want to bring that forward.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, and thank you for that, Councillor Nordyke. I do think it's very important. Did I say Nordyke?
You did.
I'm so sorry. She's just so close. No, just kidding. Councillor Stapleton. I think this in particular is very important, and we need to do it well and do it right, so that we can, as you say, just increase the amount of trust that we have from the community. Just to clarify, for me, you may have said this, but is the Finance Committee going to be responsible for the scope of this work?
Yes, we will bring the scope of work to the Finance Committee, and we won't move forward with that scope of work until the Finance Committee gives us a thumbs up.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Phillips.
I think these are just probably my comments on this at this point. I can understand from a certain point of view that, maybe mixing things up and trying something other than Moss Adams in an ideal world would be, something we could consider. But I've been persuaded by the realities of what we've all gone through in the last year plus, and the comments tonight that it's probably best to go forward with Moss Adams, because I get a sense it would cost less and be done sooner. I do have some concerns, though, if that'll be satisfactory in terms of communicating to a broad enough swath, not just of council, but to our community, that it'll be persuasive. I mean, the way that I see it working, because I have to start with I have to create a straw man to then argue against before. So for me, what intuitively seems like what could be done for sequencing, and it doesn't mean it will be, but we do something like, the library and parks, or the library and the center for 50 plus in May. And then in November, maybe we do something like police and fire. So we kind of try a smaller thing first as an option levy, and then try what I think would be a slightly bigger ask for public safety in November. We can learn from what we do in May. But I just feel like if we don't have something ready for council to consider that could go on the ballot in May, it's a missed opportunity. And it puts us further behind the 8 ball. And, the consequence of I guess we'll live it, if we don't agree to what reality is. At some point, the money's going to run out, and then, real cuts are coming. And those cuts aren't just to the library, which we narrowly avoided this year, but we're going to be losing police officers and fire stations. So, all of this for me is I want to try to move as efficiently, yet patiently and thoroughly as forward in as a constructive way as possible. So I think Moss Adams does great work. It sounds like they're very reputable. And, the data that we've been presented from multiple different perspectives, I think the data is just true regardless of our opinions. But I think we should try as a city, not just as this council, be ready to have the option to put something on the ballot in May, because otherwise those cuts are going to be rough. But those are my thoughts.
Further discussion? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. what I'm hearing is we're all trying to understand sort of the timeline and what information can be brought to us. And I know that Courtney Knox Bush already sort of gave us a little timeline, and so did Elizabeth Kennedy Wong. And Manager Staley, you also talked about a potential of another audit. Could we just review timeline of when we need materials or information such as polling? Sounds like September, but I'd just like a review of that timeline. And I'd also like to hear from Elizabeth a little bit on what her goals are, again, in a timeline, getting out to the community so that we can really understand what we're going for.
I can start in regards to the polling question. Our intention is to get out to the community with the poll starting in September 10th. I think it's about a 2-week polling process. So DHM and John Horvick would have the data back, and they would be able to start packaging that and be in a position to bring that back to City Council at a work session in October, on October 21st, I believe it is. So that's the time frame that we're aiming for from a polling perspective. As to the rest of the work plan, that's more ongoing and aiming towards, whether it's May or it's February with a council decision, but helping to support that community education and decision-making process of council and the community ultimately, should we put a ballot measure on for May.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm in support of moving with what we can move forward with as soon as possible. I would like to see us bringing something to the May ballot. So I will basically be voting in favor of moving this work plan forward.
Further discussion? Councillor Hoy.
I'll be voting to move it forward too. And I want to say publicly that in this entire city council season of my life, Colleen Rosilis and Annie Rose are two of my greatest people to experience in this arena. So this is not me out to get Moss Adams. It's just me out to help to build trust in the community with the work that we're doing. So thank you.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Just want to invite everybody to the Finance Committee meeting. Anytime. They're all open. Yeah, just showing up. There's a line usually, but we'll find some room for you.
Further discussion? Councillor Nishioka, do you have a motion?
I do. I move to authorize the city manager to begin the work plan to understand our community's priorities for city services.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips. Councillor, to your motion.
I think we've heard it.
Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councillor Varney.
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councillor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councillor Phillips.
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn.
Aye.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councillor Hoy.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we're on to information reports. Does anybody have anything on item 6A? 6B? Councillor Stapleton.
Just really excited to see more housing going in Ward 1.
Awesome. Anything else? 6C? We have no first readings, no second readings, and we have nobody signed up for public comment under item number 8. We're adjourned.